The thoughts, views, and comments expressed by Sidebar, its guests, callers, and advisors are not necessarily those of the management, ownership, or production unit of ILS Verizon Media Group. Sidebar, a 103.5 The Beat podcast, is a production of ILTV Studios and may not be reproduced or represented, in part or in its entirety, without the express written consent of Verizon Media Group. Sidebar is the intellectual property of Verizon Media Group. Copyright 2024. All rights reserved.
Hey, welcome to Sidebar, a 103 The Beat podcast powered by ILTV. I'm Stephen Hanna. So, election time is upon us, and I do want to talk about election stuff, but in a larger context, and in a direct but also not direct way. It will not be vague. But before we get to the meat of the matter, there's something that has been bothering me for a significant amount of time, and if it's my problem, it's now your problem. I would like to get it off my chest. I would like for us as a people, however you wish to define that, we need to get over this fascination with things that are not boring. We need to appreciate boring things. We need the boringness to not necessarily overwhelm us, but like that needs to be a part of who we are. This fascination with being entertained is holding us back from achieving anything of significance. If you want to get to the fun stuff, you need to go through the boring stuff. And this fear of even a moment of boredom is killing us. Both literally and figuratively. Because like there are things that we are doing that are putting life and limb at risk, because we are constantly looking for stimulation and stimuli. And whether that is engaging in unsafe sexual practices, whether that is our dietary habits, because like, God forbid that you eat something that doesn't have bacon or cheese on it. And I'm saying that as somebody that puts cheese on things, all right? Who doesn't love a good goat cheese or some feta on a salad, right? But our desire to constantly be stimulated, and we're always indulging in that, is messing us up both in that regard. We're both, bored, and then we find ourselves, particularly like when you're young, this happens more often in a loud, obvious way. You are bored, and somehow you end up playing with matches. You're bored, and you end up running around somewhere and you break something. You're bored, you end up hanging out with bad company, right? As a kid, it is more obvious. As an adult, you're like, I'm gonna say adult. For example, young adults, suddenly somebody who has no business being around drugs or drug dealers or gangs or criminal activity, who has been raised so far away from all of these elements, finds themselves around people with guns or holding a gun because like they're fascinated by it, and it's like, oh, it's so exciting, and the thrill. And to what end? All right, you're jumping on motorcycles with no helmet on because like I do believe there are people out there who are riding motorcycles without helmets because they in their mind are like, I can't afford a helmet. Helmets are expensive. and this motorcycle is the only way to get from point A to point B. There are those people, but then there are also people who are like, wait, when I pop in, I just feel alive. And I get it, and that's coming from somewhere else. But it's also leading to our destruction. And that's more or less a young adult thing. The older you get, when you start slipping down in tubs by yourself and you rolling your ankle or you get up too quick and you get dizzy, when you get to that age, right, in your late 30s, early 40s, your 50s, when you get to that age, it's like, oh, my back is hurting because I slept weird. I didn't sleep on anything soft enough. You'd start making better life decisions, but at that point, it might be too late. But once again, the boring aspect of life that we shun is where everything is. The movies that you watch, that you like, the music that you listen to, that you like, the artwork that you like, the clothes that you like, the food that you like, all of these things are coming from persons who've dedicated their lives to things that you would find boring in order to bring you this wonderful thing. But you're just getting the processed food. You're not getting you're getting the end product. All right. Bread has kept human beings alive for millennia. It is the reason that we stopped being hunter-gatherers where we're able to harvest wheat or some sort of grain, grind it down, add water, heat it up. Now we have bread. And that's how we got cities. That's how we got civilization because of that. But then when you start to eat bread and you're not going through the process of you processing it yourself, you're not growing the wheat, you're not grinding the seeds, you're not baking the bread, it's being done by a machine and you're just getting the end product that is super refined, that's going to be unhealthy. You take out all the work, all the boring parts, and you're just getting the end result. And in a way, that is kind of a metaphor for government and governance. The average Bahamian does not understand how any budget works, let alone the budget. They don't know how to critique it. And in some way, you can blame and you must blame the gatekeepers. The gatekeepers are not sufficiently educating persons in the boring stuff because they're like, well, if we sit down an hour after the news or an hour before the news to pull out the graphs and the charts and say, okay, this is how this works, and this is what you're actually looking for, and this means this, and this means that. And even though the GDP is this, or even though the economy is growing, you may not feel it directly because it's a type of average. And yes, $100,000. The economy is growing this much percent, but that all of that growth happened in this one small area over here, and that doesn't affect you. We're not taught or told any of the stuff, given any of the tools to measure that and to figure that out. And because we don't have those tools that you only develop, skills that you only develop by going through the boring process, we're just getting that weird, gummy, over-processed bread that when you take a bite of it, it sticks to the roof of your mouth. All right? And you know what? Occasionally as a sandwich, it's okay, but it is not a sustainable practice. It will not sustain you in the long run. Our fear of the boring is killing us because we don't even know what's wrong. We know something is wrong. Inside you, you wake up in the morning and you're like, something is wrong. I'm frustrated. By the time I get to work, I'm frustrated. And I have a job, and I was told once you get a job, that's all you need to do. Once you have a job, everything's going to be fine. But you're still frustrated, and you don't know why. And the only thing you know is I need relief from this, and you go look for fun. You don't try to figure it out because figuring it out is boring, and that is further depressing you. All right. And so you're looking for the stimulation. And while the obvious stimulations of somebody out there, they're doing weed and alcohol, or they're doing, sorry, drugs and alcohol, right? Those persons, they're living a promiscuous lifestyle. Those ones are we're easy to condemn and say that person is just looking for that weird stimulation, and that's why they're so angry, and that's why they drive fast, and that's why they're doing this. But when you stay home and you do nothing but watch movies, or you indulge in the violence that is the news, when you're only on Facebook complaining with search for no search for a solution, as well as no viable solution to offer, you are engaging in the same sort of practice. You're doing the same thing as the person who is trying to get rid of their problems by drugs and alcohol, wanton, unprotected sex. Because I'm from the 80s, right? I was born in the 80s, grew up in the 90s, and so those are the worst things that a person can do is drugs and alcohol and unprotected sex. Those are the worst things a person could do. But even if people stop doing those things, society still has many an issue. And we only figure out what those issues are by taking a long, hard, and often boring look at society. We have, and to bring it back to governance, what we've done is we've outsourced the boring to elected officials. We don't want to think about how the economy works. We don't want to think about where jobs come from. We don't want to think about, well, how are we going to pay for anything? We don't want to think about how does diplomacy work? If we take something from one country, will it offend another country? And at what point do we not take anything? Or what point do we decide it is a feasible risk to take something from one country and not the other country? These are boring thoughts that it's like, I would just rather watch a movie. Tell me about the person who got killed. How gruesome was their murder? Tell me about the person who was charged with a crazy sentence. They're going to be in jail for the rest of their life because they did a heinous crime. Remind me again of the horrible crime that they committed, because that is stimulation. That makes me feel alive, and I don't have to think about the boring details of how to solve it, because solving issues is boring. You know what is like, and as a kid, you understand it because as a kid, everything is so simple. You see it in broad strokes. As a kid, you know the level of fun of picking up a rock and throwing it through a window and breaking the window. You know the fun of breaking glass bottles. And once again, I grew up, I was born in the 80s, so forgive me. I only had Z Nest and Windows. Um, and so there's a level of fun in destruction. There's a level of fun in tearing down that explosion, that clattering of glass. That there is fun in that. The the time it takes to learn how to make glass, the skill of forming glass, just to make even like a simple straight window pane, is not something that people automatically know. It takes time. And some people might call it boring. Now, some people naturally would be like drawn to that and they don't find that boring, but there are people who are going to find that boring. We have glass everywhere. I'm often driving in traffic or walking down the road and I see a truck with multiple windshields carefully stacked on the back of it with little cushions between it, holding it both in place and not letting them touch each other and break. Have you ever seen somebody install glass? it seems this is a not just arduous task, not just tedious, but it's kind of boring. They're putting glass in. It's essentially a giant puzzle that if it shatters, you're out hundreds of dollars. So like this is a boring task, but it is a necessary task because you can't drive without a windshield. You can't get your car license if you have a crack in your windshield. If you're driving and you have a small hole, a little crack, the sealant on your windshield is not correct, water's going to start pouring in your car. It is going to make it difficult for you. This is a necessary, boring thing to accomplish, to do, and every step along the way is boring. But you know it's not boring? Taking a giant rock and throwing it through somebody's windshield. That's exciting. But that doesn't move the country forward. We need the boring stuff. And it's hard to sell ads for boring. It's hard to say, I'm going to bore you now, but you need this information in the last 30 minutes. It's going to make so much sense. It's going to make so much sense. That's going to be great. But for you to get it, you got to sit through this boring bit. That's a difficult pitch to give people, but it's necessary. So to bring it back to governance, and then we'll make our way to the election and the actual election topic. If you don't know how the government works, you cannot question properly if they're doing a good job, because the job that you may think is their job may not be their job. It may be, but it may not be. But it requires you to know how your government works. And you may think you know, but if the knowledge that you've gleaned from how governments work is from television, the majority of Bahamian television is just news. It's not like you're being taught how the Bahamian government works because we have a Bahamian law and order. You probably know more about the American government and how the American legal system and government system works and their branches of government than you do about your own country, because they figured a way to insert the boring into interesting things. That's the point of culture, but that's a different topic for a different day. If you don't know what the MP does, if you don't even understand how what a prime minister is, how they function, how they're selected, you will say things like, I want Lincoln to be prime minister, and I'm going to vote for Lincoln to be my prime minister. But you can't unless you live in the constituency that he is running in. I'm trying to remember. I feel like I don't think there are 3,000. Well, at last count, the last time. So it is impossible. The majority of prime ministers, when we say the majority, every prime minister that this country has ever had has been selected by a handful of people. They've been voted on, they've been voted for by a couple of thousand people. They weren't voted on by the entire country. That's not how the system works. They are the first among many. There's a consensus from all the different people who have been selected to represent the House. Anyway, it's a boring thing. And do you really care? You may know, but you may not care. If you don't have or know the boring stuff, you're going to get frustrated. And then you're going to start saying, like, well, we should try something new and try something different when you've not fully utilized the options available to you. which brings us to elections. Like, what is... I think that we put too much emphasis and too much power. Or it's not even power. We put too much... We think elections are more important than they are. And that's what I really want to talk about today. And of course, it'll make more sense if you both know and are willing to do the boring stuff. So the next part will not be me talking and trying to convince you to spend the next 3 days inside the library diving into a book. But I do want to talk with you about maybe elections aren't as important as you think they are. Or maybe they are. Anyway, let's take a quick break. When we come back, we'll have the discussion. You are watching and listening to Sidebar, 103 to B podcast, powered by ILTV. I'm Stephen Hanna. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Sidebar, 103 to B podcast, powered by ILTV. I'm Stephen Hanna. I should put on my glasses because I do not have the vision of my youth. Staring at computer screens for decades has taken its toll on me. And so, for all our sakes, I want to talk about the importance of elections. And if you have or were indoctrinated like me, you would think that elections are the most important thing. They are the most critical function. This is what every citizen must do and must participate in. And don't get me wrong. Have I registered to vote? Of course I have. All right. Do I have an idea who I'm voting for? Of course I do. All right. That's neither here nor there. All right. And here's the thing that even I have been guilty of, and I'm working on myself to repair this. So I'm speaking to you from a point of honesty. If all of our power is solely on one day every 5 years, then we have zero power. Elections, while voting for the correct person to represent both your interests, to make the laws that help govern the land, and all those words sound fancy, but it's like in the end of the day, it's just, if we pretend the Bahamas is a club, we want to make sure that the club works a certain way. So what time does the club open? Who all can come in the club? Is there a uniform for the club? What happens if somebody comes to the club late? Is there a fine or a charge? How do we pay for the food at the club? How do we pay for somebody to clean the club after we've had a party? Can we have parties? How often can we have? So we get some people from within the club and we say, this is your job to figure that stuff out. And once you figure it out, we'll go along with it. And that's all the government is. All right? but you want the right person making those decisions. But here's the thing. That executive within your club, all right? And when I say club, I'm talking like how schools have club, like a what's it called? Like a drama club or a chess club, right? So you decided on these 5 people, these 10 people, they're going to help run the club, and they're going to help figure out the rules and help to enforce it, and figure out how we're going to raise money. Are we going to raise money by bake sales? Are we going to raise money by everybody who's a part of the club has to bring in $5 every day? Like, how are we going to make this work? So that's the club. Even if every person who has been elected to those positions in the club did their job to the best of their ability, if the other 100, 150, 200 members of the club do nothing, the club is going to fail. It is a fallacy to think that the president of the chess club and the treasurer of the chess club and the sergeant at arms of the chess club and the minister of health of the chess club are solely responsible for whether or not the chess club is going to win any chess matches. Whether or not the members of the chess club learn new techniques in how to play chess. It would be ridiculous, no matter how much revenue, how many bake sales they have, you're losing because you're not practicing. And now let's step out of the metaphor for a second. Actually, no, before we come with the metaphor, even if everybody in that chess club executive was horrible, the chess club could still have a great reputation. They can still be a winning chess club. They can still have people who say, I want to be a part of that chess club, even if the executive members say, oh, every day we practice at 9 a.m. or we practice every day at 5 p.m. because it's a chess club. I'm assuming these are students. 5 p.m. every day. Or 4 p.m. every day after school, we're going to go and we're going to practice, and they never show up. And they themselves don't know how to play chess. And they're fully corrupt. And they steal all the bake sale money. And every time we give them $1, they walk off with it and they go buy candy with it. Even if all that is happening, if the members of the chess club are playing chess, are putting in the effort, are coming in and saying, oh, there's garbage on the floor, I'm going to pick it up because I don't know if we have a janitress or a janitor or a custodian to pick up behind us. I'm going to sweep this out because there's a broom and they can make this happen. People will still look at the chess club despite it having a flawed leadership and say that is a chess club that works hard. Those guys are doing something. Now let us step out of the metaphor. While I get it, and part of it is the indoctrination that I have suffered for all my years within the country and on the planet, that voting is this important act. It is not the only act. You are failing as a citizen if you think that your responsibility as a citizen starts and ends with going into the booth. You don't have to vote. In all honesty, I don't care if you vote or not. I honestly don't even care who you vote for. But if you are not doing anything to better the Bahamas, then you are actively failing. You are destroying the club. You're giving the club a bad name. You're the reason why we don't win any matches, right? If we, even in the ideal situation where we're trying to raise the money without taxing every member of the club, but there's only so much money. and there's only so many times you can have a bake sale, and we only have so much money to raise money to have cupcakes to sell in the first place to make more money. We only have enough money to get 4 cupcakes. And we're really just we're trying to convince people it's a luxury cupcake good that they could participate in. Whatever, right? But you don't even practice playing chess. You come in, you sit on the chair any sort of way, you break it up, and you feel no level of obligation to the club. What are we doing? If you vote, great. That's half a point. It's not that big a deal to do one thing one time, once every 5 years. If that is all it is to being a Bahamian, then it sounds like being a Bahamian sucks. There must be more. What are you doing for other members of this club called the Bahamas? How are you helping them? What are you doing within your own community? That's more important than voting. A couple weeks back, I had a little rant. What is it that what is the problem within your community? How are we working towards fixing that problem and the actual problem, right? And even if you're asking for assistance in fixing the problem from members of parliament, cabinet ministers, government officials, whomever, not even knowing what the problem is a problem. But also, what are you doing? Like, if we think that we have a crime problem, it is no new information. We've known for decades, if not centuries. It's a saying, idle hands are the devil's playground. If you have after school activities and clubs and things for kids to do, they're less likely to get involved with foolishness. If you really think that the young people are just out here shooting and killing up each other, and you understand the right way and the way away from that, where is your contribution? And I'm not even telling you to start a boys and girls club by yourself. They exist. Are you going to them and saying, hey, how can I help? And you say, oh, well, Stephen, I'm too busy. That fine. Can you give them $5 to buy some pizza? Whatever. But for you to think that you are not culpable or responsible for the murders that you seem to think are so outrageous and wrong, and that the government needs to do more about it, you and all your sins are expunged because you got some ink on your finger once every 5 years is ridiculous. You're not doing anything. If you think, because like crime is the issue, then you have other issues like, oh, well, first of all, the jobs thing is like, that requires you to do the boring work, all right? Everything to do with money, we've been tricked. The super rich people, none of them are funny. None of them are singers and dancers and entertainers for a reason. They are persons who, they love the boring. The richer they are, the more boring they are, because that's where all the money is. The money is in the boring. That's where all those zeros and ones, that's where the real money is, right? And so if you want to fix these things, you got to be willing to wallow in the boring. You have to be able to say, I'm going to do that. It is not going to be enough to say, we need somebody to fix the economy, and you don't even know what the economy is. You voting for somebody to fix it, they might be fixing it, just not in a way that helps you. It helps somebody who's already rich. But now if you're willing to do the boring work and figure it out, you might be at least able to help your household, your extended family, your neighborhood. You might be able to help you and your friends. And if you don't hoard that knowledge, they might be able to pass it around. And suddenly now we're all lifting each other up out of poverty or throwing ladders down because you can't really lift yourself. It's like it is literally physically impossible to pull yourself up by the bootstraps. That is something that people say, and it's there are times, sidebar, we say things that are so stupid, right? And I don't think that we fully, there's a chance that the person who first said it was saying it in a mocking tone. In the same way where people say, the voice of the people is the voice of God. The saying that is written down is, you have heard it said that the voice of the people is the voice of God, but in the voice of the mob is madness, is the one that's written down. Excuse me. So at some point, somebody did just say the voice of the people is the voice of God, but that person has been lost to antiquity. And when we got to the part where we were writing things down, that person said, that's stupid. Fight fire with fire. There is literally very a minuscule amount of times where you fight fire with actual fire. And that is like with brush fires and forest fires, where it's like, okay, if we do a controlled burn here, it'll stop the spread of the fire. So that does happen. But generally speaking, you don't fight fire with fire. You fight fire with water, with a suffocating foam, with depriving it of oxygen or fuel, sand. Sand is a way to fight fire, but you don't fight fire with fire. But people say sometimes you got to fight fire with fire. All the time, when it is maybe 1% of the time you fight fire with fire. Generally speaking, you do not fight fire with fire. You fight fire with water. That makes more sense. And so people, anyway, none of that matters. The point is, voting is not enough. You've not done your part as a Bahamian citizen just by voting. I would rather no one vote if everyone was an active citizen. If everyone was saying, well, if I spend 8 hours at work every day, for some people 5 days, for other people, through some fluke and manipulation of the laws of the country, 6 days a week. I do not understand how that happens, but true God still. If you could just contribute 1 hour of your week to building the country, and not in a hypothetical, fantastical, oh yeah, we're building the country. What does that mean? You know what I mean? Like building the country, like with literal, tangible, actionable steps. You're actually going and helping somebody, even if the person is related to you. If you're going to an old person's house and saying, hey, you want me rake your yard? You good? Checking on them. Hey, I'm going to the food store. You need me to pick you up in it? You do that. And if everyone was doing that and no one voted, the country would be in a better place. What we have is thousands of people. And I understand it is a tempting offer to utilize this one moment of power, and it gets to our head and say, oh yes, now the politicians are listening to me, so now we're all going to go on a strike. Doesn't solve the issue. There's only so much money. We know what the problem is. We are choosing to not look at the boring and try to figure out the boring solution to our actual problem. What we choose to do is say, oh no, if we put enough pressure on them, we'll force them to do what we want them to do. So essentially, if we do violence to the government, they will capitulate for us for this short span of time, for these 12 months, as opposed to we could fix our problems if we all got together. And I don't need all 450,000 of us to all be on the same page at any time. Small groups. If you could get you and 10 other people to be on the same page, and everybody did that, the country would be in a better position. We'd be in a better place. But that is itself, that is the rub. That is the hard thing. The rub. That is the crux of the matter. One of those things. One of those weird sayings that people constantly say, and it doesn't mean anything. It's not enough to vote. It is not enough to register to vote. I'm not telling you not to vote. I'm certainly not telling you to vote. I will never tell you who to vote for, although I may strongly suggest who not to vote for. But I am begging you, do not think that all of your power and all of your ability and everything that this country is worth is wrapped up in that single day where we go and stand around schools, some of us for the first time in decades, on a line, waiting to get ink on our finger, and then go home because we have no national sports leagues. We sit down and we watch the votes come in. It must be something more than that. You are not, it's not enough. It's not enough. Anyway, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to wrap it up. You are watching and listening to Sidebar, a 103 to B podcast powered by ILTV. I'm Stephen Hanna. We'll be right back.
Not too much water. Put it down. Let's go.
It's the Bounce Back 150K payday. Big wins for 10 weeks straight. 15K every week. 10K to a lucky winner. Visit islandluck.com for more info. Island Luck. Winners live here.
Welcome to Paradise Premium Foods, where exceptional taste meets everyday convenience. Right in the heart of Hurricane Hole Plaza, whether you're planning a beachside brunch, an intimate dinner, or simply restocking your favorites, we offer only the finest selection of local and imported goods, handpicked for quality, freshness, and flavor. At Paradise Premium Foods, shopping is effortless, service is personal, and every visit feels like a treat. From gourmet meals to go, to organic essentials and indulgent treats, this is your neighborhood market elevated. Live well, eat better. Discover Paradise Premium Foods, now open at Hurricane Hole Plaza, Paradise Island. Paradise Premium Foods, taste the difference.
Welcome back to Sidebar, 103 to Beat podcast powered by ILTV. I'm Stephen Hanna. Today we are, and it's still going on, talking about the importance of elections. I feel like I should definitely be very clear. The people who are making the laws and signing these international agreements, making sure that those people are the right people is an important task. But let's not lie and pretend as though that is what the majority of people are voting for. We are voting because we have a large group of people who are voting for one party because that is the team that they pull for. We have another large group of people who are going to vote for another party because that is the group or the team that they pull for. We have a small subset of people who were let down by both of those parties and they form other parties and they're going to vote because that's their team. But here's the team thing. Right, if this was the NBA, then cool, bro. But we in this real life. This real life. So you must, while it is important for the person who is in charge, who is in the executive making these decisions, figuring out the legislation, making these trade agreements, making whatever. Those people, that is important. One, that's not what the majority of us are voting for. Two, even if somebody told you that they had a plan and the plan made sense and you agreed with the plan, when they get in the seat, there's no guarantee that they will fulfill the plan. The only thing that you have control over, and this is three, is yourself. What can you do? Particularly when you don't know anything about the economy, about economics, about multinational trade agreements. You don't know anything about this stuff. You don't know how to get jobs to make guano. You don't know how to build enough infrastructure to not only get persons to visit there, but persons to move there, to stir up the economy in order for persons to return back home to make guano, but new people to come from New Providence to build the infrastructure, to inject money into the economy. You don't know how that works necessarily. But you know what you know. I refuse to believe that you are here and you have no skill that is transferable, no skill that is of value to the greater good of the country. That is where your real power lies. The real power that we have is the power of community. That is the only thing that is going to save us. Because best case scenario, we have leaders who care about the Bahamian people and they're making every decision with the hope of making the Bahamas the best possible country ever. That's the best case scenario. And even in that best case scenario, they have no control over what other governments do, the choices other governments make. They have no control over the weather, to the best of my knowledge. They have no control over the price of fuel, the price of food. They have no control over the price of regular goods and services like clothes and other things that we need. It is what it is. We are subject to the winds. But now, if you know how to grow food, and it might not be that crazy, you might know grow a little something, and you're willing to start a community garden. If a war were to break out and suddenly we had no access to wheat, and the bread that helped to form civilization is removed from our diet completely, and we no longer are able to make macaroni and cheese and bread and so many other things because wheat is in almost everything, right? But you knew how to not just grow breadfruit, and you have breadfruit trees, and you also knew how to pick them and how to cook it, but also how to process it and make breadfruit flour. You could, and you don't need a war to start this. You could help the Bahamas in a way that is beyond what a politician may have wanted to do. They might have the vision to do it. They might give out grants and lease land, but you have that ability. And that, at the end of the day, will be more important than you going to vote, than your one vote. And once again, I don't want to belittle the idea of voting. I don't want you to think that don't walk away from here thinking Stephen said voting ain't important. Voting is not the most important thing. The most important thing is your participation after the election is done. That's where your real power lies. And if your power is only effective on one day every 5 years, then you have no power. What you have is somebody playing as though they're listening to you until you go away. That's all we have time for today. This has been Sidebar 103 to B podcast powered by ILTV. I'm Stephen Hanna. True God still.
Once something becomes the common behavior, it is the common behavior. When you operate at that level, personal emotions simply cannot float to the top.
For the average normal person that goes to the store, things like that affect us.
They must be judicious in the execution of their duty.
Well, I think whatever the nurses want, give it to them.
Hedges, you know, you do everything on your phone now. You see how old he is?
What are we walking back? That Bimini is no longer an island?
That's
Okay,
not
because-
what he was trying
because
to
he also-
say. Carla, I don't even know what breadbasket anymore either. What do y'all people say?
So you want a space. But not just any space. You need something with a little more potential. So how about 1,000 square feet of room to play with? Superb audio and video production capability, digital LED wall, full lighting grid, and about 124 seats to accommodate a full studio audience with so many other features. Make us your home for your next concert, conference, and so much more. Honestly, the possibilities are endless. Here at ILTV Studios, we'd love to bring your next event to life. So what do you say? Do you want our space?